Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, I'm going to read for you the names of the apparently elite heavyweight fighters that would get one a mandatory shot at a heavyweight title. Right? Corey Phelps, Richard Carmack, Zoltan Petrani, Michael Marone, Emilio Zarate. Now, right about now, I'm guessing on this boxing site, where I believe the typical viewer has watched and loved the sport for years. I'm guessing there are many of you who are saying, who? You might recognize one or two names, but you're thinking, wow, who are some of these other guys? Right? These guys aren't on my list of top heavyweights. So what's Dwyer talking about? Well, what I'm talking about are the last 5 guys who Shannon Briggs has fought. Think about it. But yet, given these names of guys who may or may not be in witness protection, the WBA has announced that Lucas Browne is going to fight Shannon Briggs for its title. Now, you know, I'm a longtime fan of Shannon Briggs. I remember when he fought Lennox Lewis back in the 90s, right? Shannon's a colorful character. I think he's good for boxing. But again, as an addendum to the video I made yesterday, when I was wondering how Eric Molina was a guy who was getting multiple shots at the heavyweight title in this climate of several very deserving candidates, right? Molina fought Deontay Wilder. Now his next fight is against Anthony Joshua, right? I was wondering, gee, of all the fighters out there, why is it that Eric Molina is getting the opportunities? You know, I thought, what could be more ridiculous than that? Well, less than 24 hours later, of course, in boxing, I found something more ridiculous, and it's Shannon Briggs getting a mandatory shot at a title, right, from a sanctioning body. Let me just say, too, before I go further here, what we, the casual fans, really need to pay attention to here, and I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. I have no knowledge of anything on this topic, right? But what fans need to pay close attention to is going to be the drug testing in this fight, right? Why? In part because Lucas Browne, and I know very curious conditions, I myself question the conditions under which he was found to have failed a drug test, but Lucas Browne has already been stripped of a heavyweight title for failing a drug test. Right? Now, it's curious because the drug he supposedly was taking was something that fighters in lighter weights take to cut water. Right? Why would a heavyweight who calls himself Big Daddy need to cut weight, right, when there's no weight limit to be a heavyweight? So, I agree. The circumstances for the failed drug tests really are curious. But at the same time, right, at the same time, when a guy has failed a drug test, you need to be vigilant in monitoring the guy in future fights, right? Just like if, you know, cousin Benny robs banks or has robbed a bank, then, you know, you have to say to yourself, if the local bank was robbed, gee, was Benny involved? Right? Let me say this too. When I see a fighter in his mid-40s Shannon Briggs is 44, folks. With the body that Shannon Briggs has, right? Hell, when I see any guy in his mid-40s with a totally buff, ripped body, you know, I have to ask myself, is it natural or is it enhanced? Right? I think that's a fair question. I have no knowledge of any kind of cutting of corners by Shannon Briggs. I'm not here to say that, you know, I have any proof whatsoever that Shannon Briggs is juicing in any way, shape, or form. But really, all of us need to use our common sense, right? You see a guy who looks more ripped, quite frankly, than he looked 10 years ago, right? By the way, there are films of the fighters. You can literally go back 10 years. That's the beauty of YouTube and the internet. When I see a guy who looks a little bit too in shape, then I think it's fair that I pay attention to the drug testing protocol announced for the fight. And I pay attention to, right, whether or not the guys are passing the drug tests or whether there's a cloud or any kind of unusual circumstance. So, I believe in this fight more than most, right? Fans like you and me need to pay attention to the drug testing, right? When they officially announce the fight, I want to hear, is this a VADA fight? You know, is this going to be a fight where there is routine drug testing? Or is this going to be one of those fights where, you know, you hear that the guys are waiving drug testing protocols? I'd like to know. Well, assuming that there's drug testing in place and it's stringent drug testing, right? I think the fight's a mismatch. I think Lucas Browne easily disposes of Shannon Briggs, right? Briggs is a master in the pocket. The secret to Lucas Browne, right? He's big, but the secret to Lucas Browne is he moves much better than almost everyone else in the heavyweight division. He's blessed with great foot movement, right? Lucas Browne is not someone who's going to linger around the pocket. So, Browne is exactly the wrong kind of opponent for an older fighter like Shannon Briggs. Right? Shannon Briggs is best when his opponent's right in front of him. Then it becomes a technique contest. And Shannon Briggs, who's very savvy, who knows all the tricks in the books, has figured out how to land his Sunday punch. Right? But when the opponent is moving around the ring, and for a fight where Lucas Browne has a talented but stationary opponent, and Browne moves around the ring and beats up that opponent, I encourage you to look at Lucas Browne against James Toney, right? I made a post-fight video where I criticized Browne. I said, you know what, Browne's not doing much except moving around the ring, jumping in with, you know, shots, then backing away. But that was enough. I believe that's enough here. If Shannon Briggs can't catch Lucas Browne, he's going to be methodically outboxed. If I had one bet to make, just one, it would be on Lucas Browne to win this fight. If I'm looking for a hedge, the hedge would be Browne to win, hedged with Shannon Briggs by KO. Right? Quite frankly, too, folks, I don't see this fight going the distance, right? As I said, Shannon Briggs, who I know has gone the distance in other fights, but he's 44 now, right? He hasn't gone the distance as a 44-year-old. In fact, You might be surprised to learn that in Shannon Briggs's last 5 fights, none of them have made it to the 3rd round. Right? First round KO of Corey Phelps, first round KO of Richard Carmack, first round KO of Zoltan Petrani, second round KO of Mike Marone, first round KO of Emilio Zarate. Right? If this fight makes it to the 4th round, it's going to be twice as long. Right? As, well, let's say the 5th round. It'll be more than twice as long as Shannon Briggs' longest fight over his last 5. Right? Think about it. So, I expect Lucas Browne to just move around the ring. Jab up Shannon Briggs. Keep him outside. Come in with some lead straight right hands. Bust him up a bit. Right? By the 6th or 7th round, I'm expecting Shannon Briggs to be so winded and so beaten up that his corner might throw in the towel. Let's remember, Shannon Briggs years ago fought Vitaly Klitschko. He was completely decimated in that fight. I believe one judge had him losing by something like 15 points in a 12-round fight. Right? He was busted up. At the end of that fight, there were a lot of questions on why his corner allowed that fight to go the distance. He was that beaten up, folks. Right? So, I believe once a fighter has been there, and I know Shannon Briggs is a warrior. Obviously, he's a guy who's fought Lennox Lewis and Vitaly Klitschko. Right? But I do believe that older fighters, when they're getting beaten up and they realize they're outgunned and they realize they're out of stamina, that the gun has no more bullets, an older fighter will live for another day. I'm expecting Lucas Browne to win this fight big. Right? I'll hedge the play, if hedges are permitted, with Shannon Briggs by KO. I do not see Shannon Briggs being able to win this fight by decision. Let me go one step further. You know, I do consider it an outrage that this is the fight that was ordered by the WBA. So what I want people to do is to go to WBAboxing.com and look at their own ratings, right, on their website for the heavyweight division. You're going to see that their #1 contender is Luis Ortiz. Now, I understand Luis Ortiz is supposed to fight Malik Scott. You know, I'd like to know, and I know Ortiz had problems with his management and has recently, you know, changed his promotional group and stuff like that. But you've got to be kidding me. I believe Malik Scott's a dangerous opponent for Luis Ortiz, who's not the most mobile fighter I've encountered. Right? Isn't there far more risk for Luis Ortiz to fight a non-title fight than to fight a title fight? In a title fight, he would be one punch away from being heavyweight champion. Right? We remember title fights. I thought the goal of being a fighter, apart from the money, right? It's prize fighting, was to get the title. Right? How are you the #1 contender with the WBA, and yet you're not in the ordered heavyweight title fight? Let me say this too. The #2 guy is actually a name we know. Vladimir Klitschko. Now I understand Klitschko is talking about fighting Anthony Joshua. That fight would be bigger box office than fighting Lucas Browne. Right? Okay. Fair enough. Right? And Klitschko at this point, you know, he's had the heavyweight belt for a decade in the past. You know, he's thinking about legacy. He's thinking about money. He wants the biggest fights with the highest profile. So, you know, he has his own reasons for passing up opportunities. But just understand, he's the second-rated guy with the WBA. The third-rated guy is Lucas Browne. The fourth-rated guy, Alexander Ustinov. Right? Now, I'd like to know what Ustinov's people are doing, knowing that their fighter is higher rated than Shannon Briggs, but yet is not fighting for the title. That's outrageous. So, number 5 is Shannon Briggs. He's number 5 based on wins over the names I've mentioned earlier. Right? How is it possible in the heavyweight division that 2 heavyweight title fights are announced, and neither of the fights include many of the names we've, learned are elite over the years through their performances in the ring? Many of these guys somehow aren't in the mix, right? What's going on? Somebody tell me in the comment section to this video, right? Alexander Povetkin. Folks, he's lost 1 fight. It was a title fight. He's held a portion of the heavyweight title, right? He's held a portion of the title. He's lost 1 fight. That was his match against Vladimir Klitschko. How is it that Eric Molina is getting multiple shots at titles and Povetkin's name is not even in the mix? Let me talk about another guy who's been heavyweight champion, David Haye. Right? People are criticizing David Haye's quality of opponent. Right? To all of those people, please tell me, who do you think would have a better shot against Lucas Browne? Shannon Briggs or David Haye? Also, who's the Shannon Briggs opponent in that list that I've mentioned in this video that has you saying, oh, of course Shannon Briggs should be the 5th ranked contender, right? Ranked ahead of David Haye, and is deserving of a shot at the heavyweight title. You've got to be kidding me here, right? I understand there's politics in boxing. Trust me, I know it firsthand, right? There's politics in boxing. I'm aware of that fact. I understand that certain guys get certain breaks and jump to the front of the line for certain opportunities, right? But 2 weeks ago, were you thinking to yourself, you know what? I think the most deserving guys for shots at the title are Eric Molina and Shannon Briggs. Folks, that's how it's played out. Incredible. Right? So, if I'm expecting Lucas Browne to win this fight, I will be one of those people. Looking at the drug testing, I will be one of those people. Looking to see exactly how the guys look at the weigh-in. Right? Whether guys with, weightlifter bodies suddenly show up looking a little bit soft and flabby. Right? Because that'll be an indication, to me, of their readiness for the fight. Let me also point out, too, I know Shannon Briggs has gone 12 rounds several times in his career. He went 12 rounds 6 fights ago against Rafael Love. But people should know that Shannon Briggs, we're trying to get an edge on the casino. We need to know stuff like this. Shannon Briggs is a diabetic. Right? These are the kind of things where you can control it, but you need to be aware of it, especially when the guy now is 44, right? And might be fighting on the other side of the world in Australia. He's certainly fighting a dangerous opponent, to see Lucas Browne absolutely walk through a guy, I recommend taking a look at Lucas Browne against Richard Towers. Right? Make no mistake about Browne's punch. Look at the end of his Ruslan Chagayev fight. Right? Chagayev's a guy who has gone a lot of rounds with a lot of guys. Right? Beat Nikolai Valuev, for crying out loud. Right? And you got the sense of Lucas Browne's power at the end of this fight. I personally will be surprised if this fight goes the distance. Right? Again, if I had one bet to make, it would be on Lucas Browne to win this fight. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.